Hey guys, Ronnie Calhoun here. Welcome to another episode of Miss Lou Champion Spotlight. Tonight we've got Mark Brockway in the studio. He's an entrepreneur, a filmmaker, a liquor guru, and a local bartender celebrity. Let's go! Hey guys, Ronnie Calhoun here with Miss Lou Champion Spotlight. I am super excited about this interview. I've got my friend Mark Brockway in the studio today, and I've interviewed Mark already about 50 times at the bar at Pearl Street, asking him all these questions, and I'm really excited to have you in today. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. It's really nice to be here.
So let's just dive right in. Okay. Let's talk about filmmaking. Which is very interesting to me. Tell us a little bit about what got you into filmmaking. What got you interested in it?
Well, I think I kind of evolved from my love of photography. The first time I actually fooled around with film was a trip to Memphis, actually. And a buddy of mine from California, I was living out west at the time, we went to Memphis for a thing called Music Fest. And it was a way for like music promoters and record label people to get together. My partner and I were running a small little independent concert promotion thing in California. So we went, and the last day we were actually in Memphis, we drove across the border into Mississippi and went to Clarksdale, Mississippi. And we hung around with a guy named Robert Birdsong, a guy I could hear talk and tell stories all day. He was amazing, fascinating guy, and took us to all these old blues spots like Muddy Waters' old house and things of that nature. So we filmed some of this, and we took it back home and we showed our friends, and it's like, man, you should make a documentary about this guy. He's amazing. He's fascinating. And we didn't end up making the movie about him, but we ended up kind of making a film about our travels to Mississippi and Arkansas and Alabama about, with these interviews we did with these old blues musicians.
And that was your first trip to Mississippi, is that correct?
That's correct. That was like 1998. Okay, I believe. Yeah.
So Clarksdale was your first taste of Mississippi.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Delta was actually where I thought I was going to end up. Okay. But and I think I moved here in like 2003 or 2004, and there just wasn't a lot of work up there. And I happened to catch on at Dunleith, and the rest is history. I've been in Natchez since.
Wow. So you've been in Natchez for, 16, 17?
16, 17 years now, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us a little bit about the process of, for those of the people out there that may not know anything about making a documentary, what's the process like?
Well, I think from what I usually do, what I'm kind of responsible for has been like the research, finding people to interview. To me, that's a big part of it. You got to know your subject matter. Mm-hmm. You got to know the ins and outs of the story you're trying to tell, and you need to know the nuances and how to develop the story with the facts and the things that you uncover during your research. So that is, I think, from again what I have done in the projects. That's been one of the big things for me, and it's something I really enjoy. It's kind of like being back in graduate school again and like working on a paper almost,
Yeah, it's basically a research paper on video.
Correct, correct. So, you got your outline and what works here and what doesn't, and how the story continues to flow and whatnot. So that's a big part of it. And, I think for me, one of the most important things, and when we worked on, we're going to obviously talk about Mississippi Madam at some point, but I think my partner in that project, Tim Givens, I think the major thing for us was I kind of felt like we were not sort of parochial in how we approach things. We were not regimented. We kind of were accepting of all different kinds of influences and things, and I think that's important in the whole process. if you go in with too many fixed ideas, then
Yeah.
your project gets kind of stale, I think. But if you're willing to evolve and grow with that project and be accepting of those things around you, helps a good deal.
Well, and that was one of the things I was thinking about when you were saying that, is there's a balance between when you start setting out to tell a story, you probably have something in mind. But does that ever change? Do you ever have information? Because you don't want to just sell them on your idea. You want to tell the story of what actually happened, right?
That's correct. For example, with the Mississippi Madam piece, we thought initially we would be spending a great deal of time about Nellie's last few hours alive. And we didn't really go into it quite as much as I thought. We had, at one point, we were able, with the help of the Natchez Police Department, able to find lots of documentation on what occurred the 24 hours prior to her the incident that would cause her fatal injuries. And we ended up saying, like, man, it's a little too morbid. It's almost a little too personal. And obviously we have to touch on it. It's an important part of the story, but let's not make it such a main focus.
Yeah, so as a filmmaker, you have to be pretty much adapt to,
Absolutely.
as you learn more about the story, it changes the way that you tell the story, right?
Right, because in the end, it is about the story. It's not what I think it necessarily should be, or what Tim necessarily thought it should be. There are just the way things are sometimes, and you've got to be honest with yourself. I think you owe that to yourself. I think you owe that to your viewing audience. I think you owe that to your subject matter, to just let the story kind of flow and not try and force anything. Just let it come to you and proceed from there. That when we were in Oxford showing the film at our first festival, we got an opportunity to watch several films, and the documentaries that I liked kind of were, they just flowed. They seemed organic. It wasn't like, well, we got to hit this and we got to hit that and we got to hit that, and it just flowed, and you just were sucked in and drawn to the material.
Yeah, so that kind of influenced you as to, hey, this is how I want to tell my stories. It sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think you want, like I said, you want to be able to take in those influences, and when you find a good film that's like, oh wow, this just seems organic, and it seems like it's not a director or a filmmaker who's like clubbing you over the head with a point, but it's an interesting story. It's told well. The pace of the film is good, So it's.
So let's talk about that. Whenever you're talking about finding a good story, how do you look for stories? Do you look for stories, or do you just sort of see something and you're like, wow, that's really interesting?
Yeah, I think with the Nellie piece, for example, I learned about her doing the research for the blues piece. There was an article on the internet, and it was a local Natchez musician photographed in front of her house.
Wow.
And I think it was Elmo Williams, who was a really great slide guitarist who lived here, and he passed away a few years back. But there he was in front of the house, and the article was about him, but it also had like a last couple paragraphs of the article were about Nellie and this business, and I was like, wow, how the heck has nobody done a story about this, And so it just made it seem like, wow, this kind of was like this. You talk about you're using that hammer and driving a point home, but this felt like, wow, like, man, I got to do this. How could nobody have not done this in the past? And as we went forward, we did learn that there were one or two people who tried to do a book, and it just never came across. And, but nobody had attempted a doc on her.
I went to the opening, the viewing that you guys had. I think it was at the convention center.
Right.
And when I left, that was what I thought. I was like, wow, how is this not just now being done? But it was awesome. And so let's jump in. We're going to talk more about that in our next segment. But what are some of the challenges that you've come across as a filmmaker?
Well, I think obviously money is a big challenge. We made Mississippi Madam. Tim and I made it for about $11,000, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
again, tell you a story. We were at the first film festival we were at in Oxford. We were at a Q&A, and the folks who spoke before us, one of the directors was like, "Yeah, it was hard. You know, we had to go 3 days without a director of photography, and you know, we had to bring the project home for under 100,000." I was like, you know, like I was so green. I was like, I didn't even know what a director of photography was. Like we shot with a camera, literally a camera we bought in Walmart. You know,
yeah.
And we wouldn't have had that had we did a fundraiser, and some very generous people came forward and helped us, you know, get things rolling.
That's really cool, and that goes to show that a great story doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles. You know, it doesn't have to be $1 million production to be a great story.
That's right, and I think now, you know, more than ever, there's so many opportunities for independent filmmakers. You know. You have a movie camera in the palm of your hand most days. Yeah. So, you know, I think that's one thing that, you know, I wish we had that when I was really starting to get interested. You know, because it just makes it so much easier to get going, and I think it's you know, you want to be encouraging people to shoot. You know, you want to make it easy for people to shoot. You know, and that's. The advent of these amazing cameras now is, you know, I think it's good, because I think young people especially who may not have the resources, you know, most everybody's got a decent phone though, and they can record stuff on. So
some of your barriers of entry are now sort of gone.
Some of those challenges are they're still there, but they're a little dissipated. You know. And I think just, you know, having the time is another challenge. You know, Tim and I both worked full-time jobs around, you know, the piece, and you know, if you want to get it done, you know, it becomes like it's kind of all-encompassing. You know, I think we worked without like a Saturday or Sunday off. You know, I think we did. Something like 67 weekends in a row. Wow. You know, just kind of, and then finally we're just like, okay, I gotta watch one football game this year, you know, or something. So kind of took a little bit of a break, but it's the timing of it and the working it into your schedule. You know, it's one thing to have these thoughts about making a film. And if you want to do it, then, you know, you got to work around those kind of things. You know, you can't sit on the couch after you have this great idea and, you know, hope that the thing will make itself. You know? That's
right. That's right. Well, look, let's take a quick break to recognize some of our awesome partners that make these interviews possible. And whenever we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Mississippi Madam, and we'll dig into that.
Sounds good.
From regular family checkups to sedation dentistry, orthodontics and cosmetic dentistry, experience dental care the way it was meant to be. Right around the corner from a name you can trust, Miss Lou Family Dentistry.
Come see us for all your handmade and fine jewelry needs here at 415 Main Street in Natchez, Mississippi. You can also find us on the web at riseandshinestudio.com. Always remember to smile big, shine bright, and enjoy the journey.
All right, we are back in studio with Mark Brockway. And Mark, let's talk a little bit now about the documentary that we talked about, Mississippi Madam, the story of Nellie Jackson, which I think most people that watch this know who that is and everything. But for those who don't, it's a story about a lady here in Natchez and the oldest profession.
Right.
So what was the inspiration behind this? I know you talked a little bit about the newspaper article, but what really drew you to this story?
Well, I think as in general, I'm drawn to complexities, and you know, I think the really great stories, whether it be a book or a film or a documentary, you know, kind of have different angles, and you know, I think for the person who doesn't know didn't know Miss Jackson, or learning about her through the documentary for the first time, it's easy to kind of say, well, okay, well, she was a madam who ran, this house, and that's it. But her life was a lot more than that, in my opinion. And some people may disagree, but I think, you learn throughout the piece that, she's a very giving lady, and she put several kids through school, and helped civil rights activists here in town, gave them a place to lay low and get away from law enforcement who might have other ideas about their safety, whatnot. So I think her life, I think the one thing that really drew me, and this is the thing that kept me going a lot, and I thought about a ton during the film, is she was in a lot of ways very brave, because she didn't accept the role that Mississippi in the 1930s said she should have. And that was either, you're going to work for a rich white family, or you're going to work in the fields, or you'll work a job for, way less than what you're supposed to be paid. And, she said no to that, and regardless of how you feel about how she made her money, I think to stand up and say, what, I'm more than what you tell me I can be.
That's right. Yeah.
I thought was very motivating, and kind of one of the elements of the story that I just kept going back to and thinking, like, wow, I think this woman's amazing.
And I think that was a time in our history where standing up for what you believe in, and everybody can stand up for what they believe in now, but I think back then it wasn't necessarily as easy as it is today.
That's right. There's a part of the doc where Stanley Nelson, who's done a lot of work in civil rights crimes here and in Louisiana, he talks about that. She had everything going against her.
Yeah.
And yet she managed with will and street smarts and to thrive, so to speak, in what she did. And the fact that business was around for 60 years, you have to know what you're doing. Again, you could debate all day long about the morality of what the business was, but she ran that business, and she navigated tons of challenges that you and I will never experience in our lives, and the majority of us will never experience in our lives.
And so you said street smarts. That just got me to thinking about, did you learn anything about her education level? Because obviously she was a very smart person.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about her early life that we can speculate on, but we didn't include a lot because there just wasn't a lot of corroborating evidence, or facts, but basically I don't think she had much of an education at all. She was working in Wilkinson County, and we know she had a job at a logging camp cooking, and she did some other things, but I don't think the school was an option for her at that point.
So most of her knowledge came from the street knowledge, street smarts.
That's right. And I think her largest asset was probably her ability to read people, and she didn't let the fact that she wasn't maybe as educated as some folks stop her. She learned how to navigate as she went. She knew how to make connections. She knew how to handle people. That was one of her her attributes that made her created her longevity.
Mm-hmm. So one of the most fascinating parts about this story, you were talking about just different layers of it. One of the most fascinating parts of this story to me is everybody knew about it, but she had this great relationship, it seemed like, from the outside looking in, with a lot of the local leaders and stuff. And can you talk a little bit about, how many people sort of turned their head and how many people like attacked her and went after her? Was it very controversial, or?
There was, let me start from the time that she purchased that house on Rankin Street, which was in 1930. She was making connections. She knew who the mayor was, and she knew who the chief of police was, and she knew who the sheriffs were, and she knew who the people that could potentially hurt her were, and she knew how to, whether, I mean, I can't prove anything, but whether it was, here, take a little something, or, come enjoy the services for free, I don't know. I can only speculate, but she definitely knew who was out there and how to navigate potential problems. I think politically, I mean, she had a very good relationship with Tony Byrne, who was mayor here for 20 years. So that was a bulk of the time that she was, at least a third of the time she was open. And, I think he says flat out in the documentary, like, I had no interest in closing that business. It's legal in 10 states, and I think it should be legal here, is basically what he said, So she had those things going for her. There was a period in time where some of the law enforcement and local leadership did try and go after her. And, there was that murder at her house, which we touch upon a little bit, a kind of guy who we later learned ended up having injuries in the war, in the army. So he'd had some issues, let's just put it that way. And he took those issues out on one of the girls and killed her. And there were articles in the local papers for months. And, she had done a little jail time because of that, and there was all these articles. Back then we had two dailies. It was the Natchez Democrat and the Natchez Times.
Wow.
And the Natchez Times there was all kinds of editorials, like, this woman has to be blah, blah, blah. She's flaunted this, and she's, degrading the morality of our community. And, there was a trial. The then mayor and the then chief of police both testified against her, and yet somehow there she was. She did a little spot in jail, not much, but her business was run by people she trusted while she was incarcerated, and didn't miss a beat.
Man, that's pretty interesting. So what were whenever you were doing the documentary, what would you say that most people's feeling about her as a person was?
Well, I think it was overwhelmingly positive.
Positive.
And we tried, Tim and I tried very hard to get a couple of people who we knew were very anti her business. There was an old Baptist minister in town who had wrote a couple of editorials, I think, for the paper. But in the end, we tracked him down, and he refused to go on camera. He just said, 30 years ago, let's let bygones be bygones. Under the bridge, So those who might have had an issue with her, we couldn't get any to come forward. So if you see the film, it may kind of appear like, it's sort of slanted, but the majority of the people liked her. The majority of the people thought she did some good in this community, and she did do a lot of good. I mean, you hear some of the families we interviewed that, the only reason they had an Easter or a Christmas was because she brought food over, and she brought presents, and she bought a tree for them, and she did do a lot of good.
Yeah.
And,
I think that's the interesting thing about life in general is a lot of people think black or white, but I think life is mostly gray. And we live in a society where there are many layers, and if there's ever been a story with layers, then I think that this is one of them,
Well, yeah, not to repeat myself, but like I said earlier, I'm drawn to those kind of complexities.
Yeah, exactly. They make great stories.
And I think this story had a lot of them.
Can we talk about the Black Book?
Sure, we can. Absolutely. I'd love to talk about that.
So tell us about what you learned about the Black Book and the story behind it.
Well, the story of...
Without naming names.
No. It's like we're like in a confessional right now. No names mentioned. But the story of the Black Book is that, in order to stay in business, she collected the names of some very powerful clients, if you will, who used her services. And whenever things got too hot, if there was a threat of being closed down, she could say, well, how do you think blah, 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 this would look if, this book happened to get out into, public, and we were to, you were to be named as one of my customers, you know. So I am still, to this day, I waver about whether this book actually existed because 2 or 3 people, and I think they told this story. They weren't trying to be funny. It was a very serious thing, but they looked for that book at the fire at her house. They looked hard for that book to see if it could be turned up, and to my knowledge, it never was. But the story of it, I think, Father O'Connor, he has one of the great lines in the documentary, the ex-priest from St. Mary's. He said, I did threaten when donations to the church got low that I might reveal that I had the black book and, name some names, so.
Yeah.
But
that's funny.
Yeah, but I mean, several people claimed that they saw it, that it definitely did exist. Others were like, oh, it was, again, just a smart business ploy on her behalf. And, why keep those records around, So whether it exists or not, I'll leave that up to the viewer. Yeah.
Hey, either way, good for her. That's a smart business tactic. Either way you go, that's probably how she stayed in business all those years.
I'm sure that
created leverage for herself.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So wrapping up on this, what was something that maybe surprised you that you didn't know about until you started talking to people?
Oh, I think when we were first shooting, I think it was there was a surprise every other day, But I think her kind of clandestine involvement in civil rights was the thing that really just shocked me, and the respect that those young people who were down here trying to organize and get people registered to vote and whatnot, the respect that they had for her. To a person, the 5 or 6 people who worked around here, and I know there were several more, but that we could find, they spoke of her with such reverence. That was like one of the gentlemen actually said, we considered her to be one of our leaders in a manner of speaking, because you would hear her. There was a massive arrest here, and they talk about it. There's a great documentary called The Parchment Ordeal. And, when some of these kids who were arrested that day at this protest, some of these kids were 8 or 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And she's on the phone, calling the sheriffs. Now, you get those kids out of prison. And she stood up to these guys. And it was very motivating for the young people who were here trying to organize. They really had a great deal of reverence for her.
Wow. That's awesome, man. I love this story. And what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and whenever we come back, I want to talk a little bit about a project that you have coming up and hear a little bit about what's to come.
Fantastic. Sounds
right.
Good.
Hey guys, Ronnie Calhoun here. We just wanted to take a moment to recognize our awesome partners who make this show possible. Trinity Medical Center, Miss Lou Family Dentistry, Sabrina Dore Agency, Hampton Inn and Suites Natchez, Hicks Chicks, Go Mart and On the Go Deli, Rollin' in the Dough, Rise and Shine Studio, Concordia Bank and Trust, member FDIC, and Ellard Physical Therapy. All right, we're back with Mark Brockway in the studio. Let's talk a little bit about your current documentary that's coming out. What can you tell us about it?
Sure. The current piece is called "Where We Tread Daily." It's a quote from a professor at Jackson State University.
Okay.
And the film focuses on the shootings at Jackson State in 1970. I always kind of reference this, though the incidents are completely different, but a lot of people will remember the Kent State shootings that happened in Ohio in 1970. Well, the shootings at Jackson State took place 11 days after that. and a young pre-law student was killed, and a 17-year-old high school student walking through the campus on his way home after work was killed as well. And 12 other people went to the hospital with serious injuries. So,
Wow.
it's a story that, for whatever reasons, has kind of fallen through the cracks a little bit. Everybody knows about Kent State, but there are people who have raised here in Mississippi their whole life who don't know anything about what happened at Jackson, or don't even know that incident occurred. I've heard that a lot just with the few people I've discussed it with. So I think it's an important story. It captures a moment in time in Mississippi history, and honored to be able to get to work on this.
What led you to this story?
Actually, I found out about it watching or listening to a podcast. There's a guy I was listening to. His name's James DiEugenio, and he's an assassination researcher. He's wrote extensively about the Kennedy assassination, Robert and John, and the MLK assassination. So I was listening to this podcast, and at the end of it, he gets into the Vietnam War a little bit, and he mentions, well, you have the young people revolting and rising up against the government, and kind of showing that they're tired of this war and they want it to end. And unfortunately, it leads to 4 kids being killed in Ohio, and you had shootings at Jackson State as well. And I was like, whoa!
Jumped out at you, yeah.
I had never heard about it. Like a lot of people, I didn't know. And the first thing I did was I got on the computer. I was like, because there's tons of Jacksons. There's Jackson, Tennessee. There's Jackson, Alabama. It's like, Lord, and lo and behold, there it was in Jackson, Mississippi, on the campus at the time it was Jackson State College. They weren't even a university yet.
Okay.
But so that's how I learned about it. It was through a podcast that I was listening to.
Where are we at in it? Where, as far as the filmmaking process, are we halfway in? Or?
We're probably about a quarter of the way. A quarter of the way in. This has been one thing. We talked earlier about lessons learned during filmmaking. Without question, the biggest one for this project has been perseverance and the ability to be patient. With COVID, we're all dealing with the repercussions of that on some level, whether it's a small business owner or just people who are normally out being more social. And, the majority of the people who are interviewing for this film, they're 70 plus years old, and they have concerns about going out, and they want to make sure they're in a safe environment. And, when the cases spike, nobody wants to leave, so we're navigating that and working through that, but we do have 6 interviews finished, and I hope to have the shooting completed by July, and then we can start working on the editing and whatnot.
So we're not going to put a timeline on it, but coming soon,
yeah,
relatively soon.
Yeah. Well, this is part of again, something we touched on earlier about what draws me, and I love learning about the subject matter. And it's hard for me to turn that off sometimes. Yeah. I'm sure Tim got incredibly frustrated with me at points. It's like, well, I found this person. We need to go find. It's like, we have 100 interviews. We don't need to talk to anybody else. So
at some point, you just have to say, this is it.
You have to, and there aren't a lot of living witnesses to the tragedy at Jackson State. So, that becomes a little bit less of a problem. But then the issue is, hey, do we have enough people to tell the story properly? And what else can we introduce to the story to kind of beef it up a little bit? So, the film is going to be not just about the shooting. It is going to be about, Mississippi history at that time. It's going to be kind of because it didn't just occur in a vacuum. Yeah. There were 10 events prior that led up to it, and maybe more than that, but we're going to focus on maybe 3 or 4.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, I can't wait to see this. That sounds very interesting. I'm glad that you came across it, because I know that you're going to tell a great story. I know you're going to do the research.
Oh, yeah. No, we'll put in the work on that. That's for sure.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take one more quick break, and then we'll come back and kind of wrap it up.
Sounds good.
All right.
Welcome to your new hospital, Trinity Medical. Located in Faraday, Trinity Medical is the only acute care facility in the Tri-Parish area. Here, you'll find an active pursuit of holistic health, a strong, honest group of clinicians, and a consciousness of others that transcends the 80,000 square feet committed to you and your loved ones. Trinity Medical. People you know, caring for people you love.
If you like what we're doing here at Miss Lou Champion Spotlight, make sure to like, follow, share on Facebook and Instagram, and visit our website, MissLouChampions.com. It costs you nothing, and it helps us to continue to shine the spotlight on awesome people right here in our community.
See you guys.
Growing up, my parents always encouraged me to do what's right, even if it wasn't easy. I'd always hear my mother's voice say, "Do the right thing." That stuck with me. Every day, just do the right thing. The rest takes care of itself.
At Shelter Insurance, we believe in doing the right thing for our customers and our communities.
For auto, home, life, or business insurance, see Shelter Agent Sabrina Doré.
All right, guys, we're back in studio with Mark for one last segment.
All right.
One of the questions that we just thought about was, tell us about somebody that's interesting that you've interviewed, somebody that kind of jumps out at you.
Sure. There's one guy who came to mind immediately while we were talking about it. This was an interview that took place in Bessemer, Alabama. He was an old musician, a harmonica player. He's since passed away, but we were on a break, actually, and we were talking about the town of Bessemer. And he's like, "Oh, this used to be a nice place, and now it's, all kinds of drugs and violent crime." And he goes, "But I don't worry about any of that." I said, "Well, yeah, how do you manage not to be concerned?" And he reached into his belt and pulled out a Glock. And he goes, "Because I got this right here." And it had one of those laser things on it.
Oh, my goodness.
And he had the laser thing was on, and he had my partner who was filming, like, right in the chest. And I was like, please put that gun down. I'm like, please put that down. But the whole interview he just had such a unique addition from, holding us at gunpoint. His answers were he was so funny, and he had just an amazing outlook on life, and he's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah. You're not expected to be, you're not going to hold me at gunpoint today, are you? Because I'm not prepared. A
very small chance that will happen.
Oh, goodness. So the last question I got for you is, why don't you tell us a little bit about your plans, your future as a filmmaker? Do you want to stay here in Natchez? Do you want to go regionally? Do you want to go nationally? What do you see as your future?
Oh, I mean, I have no plans on leaving Natchez. This town works very well for me. I enjoy it here, and the town is, on a huge upswing right now. I think things are really coming along here. I think it's an exciting time to live here. So I definitely want to be a part of what's happening. And in terms of what I'm going to do next, I don't know, to be honest with you. Like, I was up late last night working on the Jackson State piece. And, if you go into my office, I have about 18 different piles of stuff, books and mimeograph copies. And, one of those might be a doc at some point, but I don't know. I'm completely focused on the task at hand, and then whatever happens, whether, I have an opportunity to take my films to a larger audience, hey, that's great. I hope that happens. Yeah. But, as long as I feel like I'm working towards something and moving forward with that, then I'm fine. Where we end up in the end is, that might even be out of my control, whether you call it God or a greater power or karma, we're being driven by something, and that'll lead me where I'm supposed to go.
That's right. Well, you're doing a great job right now, and I've got a lot of faith that this thing's going to go a lot further than maybe you think it will.
Hey, I'm ready for that if that happens, and like I said, I'm honored to be able to tell these stories, and as long as I get to do that, then all is good. Well,
I'm glad that I met you. I'm glad that I've had many chances to sort of sort of pick your brain, and I'm glad to do it formally now so others can sort of get to hear some of the interesting things that I've had conversations with you about over the months. And
well, I do appreciate that. I enjoy our talks when we get to see you at Pearl Street, you and Melissa, and again, I really appreciate the invitation. It's very happy to be here and really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming out.
Appreciate it, Ron.
And we want to thank all of our partners who helped make this possible. All of our viewers for watching this. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. We just want to say thank you to everybody involved with this. God bless, and as always, have a champion day.